Now the particular, I think 40 years ago, capitalism reshaped itself in a way that's brought us to this extreme, so that so many people are coming out into these occupations from all walks of life. And believe me, as an organizer who's worked on this stuff for a long time, it takes a lot to get the American people out from behind TV and American Idol and iPods and all this kind of stuff and into the streets. So something's going on. I met a friend of mine, Leslie Kagan, who organized the war in Afghanistan against the war in Iraq for United for Peace and Justice, and we kind of bumped into each other at Times Square a couple of weeks ago when many of you were there, and she said, this is amazing. Like, in the old days, it would take us 3 months and we wouldn't get this many people, and they announced this 4 days ago. So there really is something going on. But it started, I would say, early 1970s. I first encountered it in North Carolina doing work against Klan and Nazi movements, lots of attacks on people of color. And it turned out, because we were working with folks who did economic justice organizing, that the counties that had the most attacks also had the most job loss. White people there thought they lost their job. Anybody, person of color in the county had a job, they got their job. Kind of reverse affirmative action. But it turned out that a lot of those jobs, the shops had closed up and they had gone to Mexico. It was the beginning of deindustrialization because corporations wanted more profits and figured out if they moved right across the border, they went from $5 an hour to $5 a day, they could save $25,000 a worker, and they did that with worse environmental standards, worse labor standards, so this was capital flight. So it really, and I've got some lists up here, but one of the things I hand out in class is the wages, like United States in 2005, $9.56 an hour, Mexico, $1.08 an hour, Vietnam, 26 cents an hour. So workers organizing in Mexico, they get crunched there, they're making success, the shop goes to Vietnam. So it really set up this very unstable situation for workers in this country. Also encourage corporations to go multinational. Another chart up here that you're welcome to come get is a list of the world's 100 biggest economies in 2005. 51 of them are multinational corporations. The rest are nation states. So more corporations got huge and very powerful and started moving around the world. In the meantime, in this country, then, labor was destabilized. Tax on labor unions in the early Reagan administration really reduced labor, and when labor union folks make a third more than regular workers. Work was also downsized. It was made temporary. It was made very impermanent, no benefits. So at the same time that workers in this country were having their wages lowered and also being very vulnerable, there was a second move that started to be made by the 1980s of cuts in social spending. Now you would think in some kind of system where workers were more vulnerable that you would want a bigger social safety net because more people are going to be falling out of it if you lost your job. But really, they started in the Reagan administration very systematically cutting the social safety net. I lived through this when in my 30s. And social safety net, what's that? All the things that hold us together and make us safe together. It's health, it's education, it's roads, it's levees, it's libraries, it's all of those things that have kept getting slashed then and then and then. Homeless, didn't used to have homeless shelters, didn't used to have homeless populations. All of a sudden, they had them then. So, instability in work, no social safety net, and then deregulation of capital. Capital is like laissez-faire capital. Don't tell me what to do with my corporation. I will just do it for us all, and it'll trickle down to you, and just like wait for it. So these things really started moving into place in the 50s and 60s, in the 70s and 80s. The same thing that was happening globally. Ronald Reagan, United States, Great Britain were big players in the World Bank and the National Monetary Fund, been giving out loans to poor countries since after World War II, 1948. Gave $13 million to Europe to rebuild and started giving very poor countries very high interest loans because you could get a lot of money off of them. And those countries just went in and told newly emerging post-colonial countries, you really need these loans. New leaders took them to build infrastructure for corporations, couldn't pay them back, rolled over the debt and over the debt and over the debt. Nobody was inspecting World Bank loans for 25 years. By the 1980s, Reagan and his cronies looked globally too and saw, well, if you're going to refinance those loans, in other words, I got a credit card, I've maxed it out. I can't pay my bills. I need to get like an extension. I need them to raise me from 4,000 to 6,000, but they're gonna raise the interest to 25%. And if I'm not willing to pay that interest, then I don't have any money. So these countries are in that situation. The World Bank and the International Monetary Fund could say, you will get this money if you have what's called structural adjustment, which were the same things happening in this country. So cuts in social spending, deregulation of industries, deregulation of the environment, all these kind of things there. So there was a huge amount then of income disparity that was being generated. The money really never trickled down. When the World Bank started, the gap between the largest and smallest countries was 6-to-1. By the year 2000, it was 21-to-1. And the same thing was happening just kind of across the board. With women, I'm very concerned with that in gender and women's studies. By the turn of the 21st century, women, we could say, are half the people in the world, do 2/3 of the work for the 1/10 of the wages and 100th of the wealth. Now that's a huge kind of inequity that's been accumulating too. Structural adjustment programs, when you cut all those social programs, it's women who are going to pick up the care work. When they Maquilaized the economies, sent these factories overseas, 70 to 80% women there. So women have really borne a lot of the brunt of this, but communities all across the world really have too, whether they're advanced industrial democracies, which are kind of being turned in a way into failed states. I'm a lover of New Orleans. When Katrina hit, it was really an example of what happens when you deregulate, when you don't build up infrastructure. You can't privatize a levee. I can build my little levee right here, water's going to go right around it, and we saw what happened. Almost destruction of a beautiful city. So another factor in deregulation is not regulating how home mortgages are sold. So lots of mortgages were sold that shouldn't have been at 100%. So if the value of your home fell, then you were underwater, and you would pay, you know, if I spend $100,000 on a home, and I borrow $100,000 for that because that's the cost, and the value goes down to $70,000, I still owe $30,000. And if I'm struggling with unemployment, I can't pay that, that house goes on the market, the neighborhood prices go down, and so there's this whole subprime crisis that went global, and really started crashing everybody else's economy too. So at the end of the Bush administration, then they did the TARP program, $700 billion bailout, mostly to the banks, where CEOs got huge amounts of money, and Wall Street got the money, and Main Street didn't get the money, and student loans didn't get the money, and mortgages didn't get the money. So it's kind of a rolling crisis here that's led us to these profound inequities, and also to the point where people all across the country are really coming out into these occupations. And they're risking their lives to do it. Many of you may have heard last week in Oakland, a 2-time Iraq war vet was almost killed by being hit by a grenade that the police shot. He was in critical condition. I haven't heard that he died, so I think he's still in the hospital. But he's been in Iraq twice, and he comes home here to protest greed, and he's almost killed. Oakland's also called a general strike for next week. There's lots of interesting things going on around the country. So I'm really happy to be here with you in all these discussions. And